The Galactic Union's headquarters hummed with an unusual energy the day the signal from Death World 732, infamously known as Hades, arrived. Known for its brutal conditions, Hades was a barren planet where storms of acidic rain battered the land. Tectonic shifts redefined the geography weekly, and temperatures soared far beyond what most species could endure. Death worlds like Hades were generally deemed uninhabitable, and any creature surviving there was assumed to be hostile, resilient, and entirely uninterested in diplomacy. Yet the Union had intercepted a signal from Hades. It was brief, cryptic, and to the point, open to negotiation. The Union's council members, beings from every corner of the galaxy, were stunned. They were used to carefully orchestrated diplomacy, but the straightforwardness of the Hades transmission unsettled them. This wasn't a plea or a request. It was almost a demand. The council reviewed the message for hours. They analyzed it for signs of deception, debated its sincerity, and finally concluded it could be a turning point for the Union. Gaining an alliance with Hades would be a strategic advantage, bolstering the Union's influence and knowledge of harsh environments. But they needed a diplomat both tough and unconventional to handle what would undoubtedly be a challenge. In their search for such a representative, Jonas Nix was recommended. A diplomat from Earth, a relatively peaceful and low-ranking member of the Union, Jonas was unlike any other envoy. Known for his relaxed demeanor and almost anti-diplomatic approach to diplomacy, Jonas didn't rely on charm or armor. He had a reputation for blending in where others stuck out, for making friends in low places, and for surviving situations that left others scrambling for protocol. When the Union called him in to brief him on the mission, they found Jonas lounging in his office, feet up on the table, dressed in his usual attire, simple, breathable robes, and, famously, a pair of battered flip-flops. When Jonas heard about Hades, he grinned, a mix of thrill and determination lighting up his face. "They don't need some Union suit to lecture them," he said. "They need someone who knows how to hold his own." The Union advisors were horrified when Jonas walked onto the transporter in his flip-flops, waving off suggestions to wear protective gear. He was assigned a full-body exosuit, climate-adjusted armor, and an advanced translator. But Jonas waved them away. "If you want Hades to take us seriously, you don't send someone who's afraid to breathe the same air as them," he argued. "Besides, there's no point hiding who we are." As the transporter hurtled through space, his escort, a highly trained security officer, watched him with barely concealed concern. "Sir," she said, "the atmospheric reports on Hades are grim. Heat levels alone will require serious adjustment for even a limited time outside the transport." Jonas only smiled, unfazed. "Just a matter of adapting." The transporter arrived on Hades amidst the thick haze of a dust storm. The doors opened with a hiss, and Jonas took his first step onto the infamous Death World. Heat blasted him immediately. The ground beneath him cracked and dry. Hades felt alive in a primal, ferocious way. The air was dense, tinged with the metallic taste of mineral-rich dust. His flip-flops slapped against the rough terrain, and the sound seemed almost absurd in the shadow of the towering, forbidding structures ahead. Standing at the bottom of the transporter ramp was his first contact. A towering figure with glinting scales, spiked appendages, and an armored body that seemed custom-built for survival. The being regarded Jonas with what could have been amusement or suspicion. Hard to tell in a species that rarely showed emotion. "Envoy from the Union, I am Zorik," the creature rumbled, its voice deep and gravelly. Its eyes darted from Jonas's calm expression to his exposed toes in the flip-flops. "Is this armor?" it asked, voice tinged with disbelief as it gestured toward his attire. Jonas looked down, smirked, and shook his head. "Not just footwear. More comfortable this way." Zorik's hardened face softened, his scales twitching in a way that Jonas could only assume was laughter. "Comfort is a foreign concept here." "Very well, follow me, diplomat." Jonas's first walk through the Hades landscape was unlike anything he'd experienced. The ground was rough, filled with jagged rocks that could easily shred unprotected skin. A hot wind gusted through the air, kicking up dust that clung to his skin. He could feel the ground pulsing with low-level tremors, remnants of tectonic movements far below. Every step felt calculated, as though Hades itself were a living entity daring him to continue. The city's architecture reflected this brutal world. Structures clung to the rocky cliffs like ancient beasts. Each building seemed carved from volcanic rock, cooled and hardened by years of exposure. Tall towers jutted out like the fangs of some massive creature, and pathways snaked through the city, protected by walls that bore the scars of fierce storms and seismic shifts. As Jonas walked, he felt the eyes of Hades' citizens upon him. They were fierce, towering beings, covered in natural armor, many of them carrying weapons crafted from sharp, durable minerals. They moved with an energy that seemed both powerful and cautious, as if always prepared for a sudden change in their unforgiving environment. "Your union has sent an unusual representative," Zorik noted as they climbed a winding path toward the city center. "One who appears unarmored, unafraid." Jonas chuckled, shrugging as he stepped carefully over a sharp outcrop. "People on Earth say it's about what's on the inside that counts." Zorik snorted, an amused rumble that echoed off the cliffs. "Strength here is seen as visible, not internal. Your choice of attire, your openness," he added with a hint of amusement, "is as strange to us as we must appear to you." Jonas's grin didn't waver. "I'm here to understand Hades, not change it. Besides, strength comes in a lot of forms. Sometimes, not hiding is its own kind of armor." As they reached the council chamber, a massive black stone building that radiated intense heat, Jonas felt a prickling tension in the air. He knew he was about to face Hades' leaders, their most powerful, their most hardened, and they were likely prepared to test him, to see if he was worthy of representing the Union to their people. Zorik halted before the chamber entrance and turned to Jonas. "The council is cautious. They respect only those who can prove their strength. They will test you, I suspect, though their expectations are not high." Jonas merely nodded, unbothered. "I'll meet them where they are," he replied, stepping forward, his flip-flops still slapping quietly against the floor as he entered the chamber. Inside, the council chamber was filled with a harsh light that filtered in through slits carved in the walls, casting sharp shadows across the room. Seated before him were Hades' leaders, each more imposing than the last. They wore battle armor, their scales glittering with the dust and scars of 1,000 battles. Every face was set in a hard line, eyes narrowed as they took in the unlikely diplomat standing before them. One of the council members, an elder named Therak, stood and addressed him. "You represent the Galactic Union, yet you arrive dressed in disrespect." Therak's voice boomed through the chamber, filled with disdain. Jonas remained calm, meeting Therak's gaze with unwavering eyes. "I'm here to prove the Union's respect by showing we aren't hiding behind armor or machinery. I'm here, open, to meet you all as equals." The council members exchanged glances, some incredulous, others impressed. Therak's eyes flashed with something between curiosity and frustration. "Then prove your strength," he growled, gesturing to a set of smoldering pits carved into the chamber floor. "Walk the flame pits, human, if you dare." Jonas took a deep breath, feeling the heat from the flame pits radiate towards him. He glanced at his flip-flops, which had already begun to soften from the intense heat. But without hesitation, he stepped forward, his face a mask of determination. Each step was a testament to his resolve, the fire lapping at his exposed skin, sweat beading on his brow. But Jonas walked with calm, unflinching focus, his stride steady. The council fell silent, watching as Jonas reached the other side of the pits, his flip-flops smoking, his skin reddened from the heat. Therak nodded slowly, impressed despite himself. "Strength takes many forms, indeed," Therak admitted, his voice laced with reluctant respect. "Perhaps we have underestimated you, Diplomat." Jonas, catching his breath, gave a modest nod. "Strength isn't just about what you carry on the outside," he replied, a hint of a smile breaking through. After his display in the flame pits, Jonas was granted permission to remain in the council chamber. His success was not a victory to be taken lightly. Only the strongest and most determined among Hades' people could complete such a feat. The council had expected Jonas, an outsider, to falter or retreat. Instead, he'd shown a calm resilience that confounded them, his unfazed steps across the blistering heat challenging their assumptions about strength. Yet the trial had just begun. The people of Hades believed that understanding another's strength took more than a single test. For Hades' leaders, strength was the highest virtue, woven into every part of their lives, their societal structure, even their interpersonal interactions. But strength meant more than brute force. It was about endurance, adaptability, and an unyielding will. Jonas would have to prove that his people, the humans and the union he represented, were worth aligning with. After some murmured deliberation among the council, Therak, the council elder and Jonas's most outspoken critic, rose to speak. His figure, tall and imposing, cast a shadow that stretched across the chamber. His armor-like scales glinted in the crimson light filtering through the walls, a reminder that this was a species bred in the fires of a world that could crush most beings in moments. "Your first trial proved resilience, human," Therak said, his voice resonating with a gravelly timbre that seemed to vibrate through the chamber. "But survival is only the beginning. To speak for your kind, to convince us of the Union's worth, you must show that you understand strength in all its forms." Jonas nodded, taking in the room's watchful eyes. These people weren't just interested in physical feats. They wanted proof of his adaptability, his intelligence, his spirit. Therak motioned for Jonas to follow, and the council members led him down a series of sloping corridors. The walls pulsed with heat, and the further they descended, the warmer it grew, until they reached a cavernous hall. The space was filled with blinding light from enormous crystals embedded in the walls. These were no ordinary stones. They were fire crystals, Hades' most treasured resources, whose intense energy powered the city and were so volatile that they could explode under the slightest miscalculation. Therak's voice broke the silence. "These crystals represent the heart of our city. They power our homes, protect us from seismic shifts, and provide light in the endless storms that darken our skies." He paused, eyes narrowing as he studied Jonas's reaction. One who lacks precision, patience, or control cannot harness their power. "Your next task, human, is to remove a crystal without triggering a chain reaction." Jonas suppressed a grimace, realizing that a misstep could not only end his life, but jeopardize his mission and humanity's chance at an alliance. The gathered council members observed him intently, expressions ranging from skeptical to curious, while Therak watched with his usual mix of disdain and fascination. A single council member stepped forward and handed Jonas a small, delicate tool resembling a clamp, designed to handle the crystal with the utmost care. The instrument was far too sensitive for the untrained, its tips lined with a fine, gleaming material that refracted the crimson light from the crystals around him. Jonas took a deep breath, focusing his mind. The air was thick with tension as he knelt before the crystal. With his flip-flops awkwardly positioned on the uneven ground, he adjusted his grip on the tool and carefully positioned the clamp around the crystal's fragile edges. The fire crystal glowed with a volatile energy, pulsing with faint vibrations that grew stronger as he worked. Jonas recalled what he had learned from Earth's more hostile environments. Sometimes the secret to strength was to move slowly, steadily, to let the environment guide your actions rather than forcing control over it. He held his breath, allowing the faint rhythm of the crystal's energy to dictate his movements. As he adjusted the clamp, he noticed the faintest tremor in his hands and steadied himself. His muscles ached from the strain, sweat beaded on his brow, but he remained focused. Finally, after what felt like an eternity, he managed to remove the crystal, holding it delicately, its fierce energy humming in his hand. Therak's eyes flashed with surprise, his rough features softening for a moment before he masked his expression. The council members exchanged murmurs, acknowledging Jonas's success with reluctant respect. "You've shown patience and control," Therak admitted, his tone begrudgingly respectful. "Traits we seldom see in outsiders. Still, patience alone is not enough to earn our alliance. Hades has no patience for the weak." Jonas felt a glimmer of hope in Therak's words, but he knew this was far from over. For the people of Hades, Every step forward meant another test. He'd proven he could adapt to their environment, but they wanted to know if he truly understood their way of life, their values, and their unyielding spirit. After the fire crystal trial, Jonas was given a brief respite. A few of the council members led him to a chamber that served as a resting area, though the temperature was still stiflingly hot by his standards. The floor was littered with resilient desert plants, their leaves thick and hardy, and walls lined with jars containing strange powders and liquids. One of the council members offered him a drink, a bitter, earthy concoction that he could barely swallow without wincing. "You did well, Diplomat," said Zorik, the same being who had guided Jonas upon his arrival. Zorik's voice was lower now, almost friendly. Therak is skeptical by nature, but he respects strength, however it manifests. Your patience surprised him. Jonas managed a small smile, still feeling the weight of his accomplishments balanced with the knowledge of what lay ahead. Is he testing me to see if I can survive, or to see if I'm worthy? Zorik's scaled face held a flicker of something almost like amusement. For Therak, there's little difference. Strength, in his mind, is the ability to endure without giving in. He has watched countless species falter before the very essence of Hades. He needs proof that you aren't just another outsider who will fade away with time. Jonas nodded, absorbing Zorik's words. This wasn't merely about the Union securing an alliance. It was about proving that he and his people understood what it meant to persevere against insurmountable odds. And on Hades, resilience was the true currency of value. After his brief respite, Jonas was called back to the council for his final trial of the day. The council members led him to a massive arena, encircled by rows of Hades citizens who had gathered to witness the outsider's tests. The arena was a harsh expanse of sand and stone, open to the blistering sun, where competitors faced each other in contests of endurance and adaptability. In the center of the arena stood a series of tall columns, each crowned with a glistening substance that Jonas quickly identified as magnetized ore. Therak stepped forward, explaining the challenge with a grim satisfaction. Your final trial is simple, he announced, his voice carrying across the arena. You must climb the highest column, retrieve the ore, and bring it back here. But be warned, once you touch the columns, the magnetic field will intensify. It will pull you down with every step. Jonas surveyed the arena, his eyes narrowing as he measured the height of the columns. Each tower stretched higher than the last, their surfaces rough and uneven. He could already feel the intensity of the magnetic pull, its hum vibrating beneath his feet. Taking a deep breath, Jonas approached the first column. As he climbed, the magnetic force tugged against him, making each movement feel as though he were wading through quicksand. His muscles strained, his hands gripping the rough stone as he fought the pull of the ore above him. The crowd watched in silence, the council's gaze fixed on him. Every step felt heavier, the magnetic force intensifying with each column. By the time he reached the third, his limbs ached, his skin was raw, and every instinct screamed at him to stop. But he knew this was exactly what they were testing. Hades wasn't interested in displays of brute force alone. They wanted proof that he would push forward despite the pain, that he would defy even the planet's pull to reach his goal. With a final surge of strength, Jonas reached the top of the highest column, his fingers closing around the ore. He carefully pried it loose, feeling the magnetic field tug as he fought to keep his balance. As he descended, the pull lessened, though his entire body felt drained. The crowd watched in awe as Jonas finally returned to the ground, the ore in his hand, his breathing heavy but his gaze steady. Therak regarded him with a nod, a grudging respect in his eyes. You have passed the trials, human, Therak said, his voice quieter now, almost contemplative. You have shown us patience, adaptability, and an unwillingness to surrender. Perhaps there is strength in your union after all. Jonas managed a tired smile, a quiet satisfaction settling over him. The trials had been grueling, but he had proven himself. Proven not just his endurance, but his understanding of what it meant to live on a world like Hades. After the grueling trials, Jonas was finally invited to sit before the full council for a diplomatic discussion. Passing the test of endurance had granted him an unspoken respect among the people of Hades. Yet he knew that gaining their alliance would require more than just physical resilience. For Hades, strength was the ultimate virtue, and aligning with the Galactic Union, an organization known for its diplomacy rather than might, was a point of concern. The council chamber, with its high, jagged walls and beams of scarlet sunlight filtering through cracks in the stone, seemed to press down on him as he entered. Council members watched his every move, their sharp eyes filled with skepticism. This meeting, Jonas knew, would be his most challenging trial yet. Seated before him was the council elder, Therak, a towering figure whose hardened scales glinted in the crimson light. His gaze was intense, studying Jonas as though looking for any hint of weakness. Other council members sat alongside him, each of them embodying a different aspect of Hades' harshness. To the Hadeans, diplomacy was unfamiliar territory. Negotiations on their planet were traditionally a matter of demonstrating dominance and negotiating from a position of strength. Jonas would have to persuade them that the Union could offer a form of strength that Hades would value. Therak opened the discussion, his deep voice resonating through the chamber. "You have proven yourself in our trials, human. You've shown patience, adaptability, and a willingness to endure. But tell us, why does the Union seek an alliance with Hades? What does it want from us?" Jonas took a steady breath. He had expected this question, but he knew that the answer required careful consideration. Directness was valued here, but too much eagerness could be mistaken for desperation. "Hades has something the Union cannot replicate," Jonas began, his voice calm and steady. "Your people understand resilience in a way that the rest of the galaxy does not. The Union values Hades' strength, its ability to endure against insurmountable odds. But we aren't here to take from you. We want to learn from you, to share knowledge that benefits both Hades and the Union." The council members exchanged skeptical glances, murmuring amongst themselves. Jonas felt the weight of their doubts. Therak's expression remained unreadable, his gaze fixed on Jonas as he responded. "We have no need for the Union's assistance," Therak said, his voice edged with skepticism. "Our people have survived for centuries without interference from outsiders. Why should we suddenly join forces with those who have not walked our lands, who do not know our ways?" Jonas leaned forward, his eyes meeting Therak's intense gaze. "Because together, we can create something stronger. The Union has resources, technologies, and knowledge that could benefit Hades without compromising your independence. Imagine a future where Hades can defend itself with greater security, where your people can explore the galaxy and bring back knowledge that strengthens your world." Therak's eyes narrowed, his scales shifting subtly as he processed Jonas's words. "And why should we trust that the Union would not seek to control us as it has controlled other worlds?" Jonas paused, understanding the deeper fear underlying Therak's question. The people of Hades valued their autonomy above all else. Accepting an alliance meant opening themselves up to the influence of outsiders, a risk that could potentially threaten their hard-earned independence. "We're not here to control or change Hades," Jonas replied, his tone earnest. "In fact, the Union could benefit from learning more about Hades' way of life. Your strength, your values, are things that could teach us. We're not asking you to submit, but to stand with us as equals. The Union can provide resources and support in exchange for learning from your resilience. You don't have to change who you are. Instead, you would be helping the Union understand what true endurance is." One of the council members, a younger Hadean with sharp, iridescent scales, spoke up. "And what would we gain from such an alliance, human? What can your Union provide that we cannot create for ourselves?" Jonas nodded, prepared for this question. "The Union has medical advancements, technologies that can withstand extreme environments, and scientific knowledge that could benefit Hades in practical ways. We have access to stabilizing materials that could reinforce your structures against seismic shifts. Imagine Hades thriving, not just surviving." The council members listened intently, some nodding subtly, while others maintained guarded expressions. Jonas could see the wheels turning in their minds. He continued, sensing that he had their attention. "Hades' strength is unmatched," he went on. The Union knows this, and we don't want to alter it. But think of what you could accomplish with resources that allow you to preserve your world without sacrificing the way of life you value. We have seen your resilience, and it has inspired us. An alliance doesn't mean losing your autonomy. It means gaining the freedom to thrive without the constant fight for survival. A long silence filled the chamber. Jonas could feel the tension as the council considered his words. Therak, who had been listening intently, finally broke the silence. Strength, to us, is not merely surviving, but doing so without dependence, Therak said, his voice quieter, contemplative. You speak as though you understand this, yet you come from a world that does not know our hardships. Jonas met his gaze steadily. You're right, my world is not Hades. But strength isn't just in facing challenges. Sometimes it's about knowing when to accept help without losing who you are. I'm not here to pretend I understand everything about your world. I'm here to listen, to learn, and to find a way that respects both Hades' independence and the Union's goals. The council members looked at each other, their hardened expressions softening ever so slightly. Jonas could sense that his words were resonating, even if the Hadeans were hesitant to admit it. Finally, Therak rose, his imposing figure casting a shadow across the chamber. You have given us much to consider, human. Your strength is not what we expected, and perhaps that is why you intrigue us. He paused, his gaze sweeping over the council. We will convene and discuss what an alliance with the Union might mean for our people. But know this. If we agree, it will be on our terms. Jonas nodded, respect in his eyes. I wouldn't have it any other way. With that, the council dispersed, leaving Jonas to wait as they discussed the potential alliance in private. As he exited the chamber, Zorik, his guide and unexpected ally, approached him, a glint of approval in his eyes. You've managed to earn their respect, something few outsiders have accomplished, Zorik said, his voice tinged with admiration. Therak may be cautious, but he is wise. If he sees merit in your words, the others will follow. Jonas allowed himself a small smile. It's not about changing them. It's about helping them see that the Union doesn't threaten what they hold dear. Zorik nodded thoughtfully. Hades respects those who know when to fight and when to listen. Perhaps that is your strength, Diplomat. As Jonas watched the council deliberate from a distance, he felt a surge of hope. He'd come to Hades expecting to rely on his strength, his endurance, but he'd found that respect, patience, and openness were just as crucial. In a world where every breath was a testament to survival, Jonas had managed to show that strength wasn't solely about force. It was about knowing what was worth protecting. Hours later, the council reconvened, and Jonas was called back to the chamber. The council members looked at him with expressions that were less guarded, more open, though still cautious. Therak stepped forward, his gaze intense but softened by a newfound respect. The council has made its decision, Therak announced, his voice resonating through the chamber. We will accept an alliance with the Union, but as equals, not as subjects. We will share our knowledge of resilience, of survival. In return, we will accept only what is necessary to enhance our world, not to change it. Jonas inclined his head, a look of gratitude in his eyes. The Union will respect Hades' independence, and will be honored to learn from your people. Together, we'll be stronger. Therak nodded, extending a massive, scaled hand in a rare gesture of goodwill. Jonas accepted it, feeling the weight of a new alliance solidify between them. The council members looked on, some with approving nods, others with quiet acceptance. As Jonas left the chamber, he knew this was only the beginning. The alliance between Hades and the Galactic Union was an unprecedented achievement, one that could change the course of the Union and bring new resilience to both worlds. He had gained their respect, not by proving his own strength alone, but by honoring theirs. With the alliance formally established, Jonas felt a sense of accomplishment, but he knew the work had only just begun. The council had accepted him, and Hades had agreed to align with the Union, but winning over the entire population of Hades was another matter. The people were skeptical of outsiders, and rumors began circulating that Jonas's acceptance by the council had been a stroke of luck, or that he was somehow weak for avoiding the direct, combative strength Hades was known to prize. He realized that if he was to succeed in solidifying this alliance, he needed to prove his mettle once more. This time, not just to the council, but to the whole of Hades. Therak approached Jonas the next day, his expression grave, but laced with a hint of respect that hadn't been there before. "There is one final step if you are to win the loyalty of our people, Jonas Nix," Therak intoned, his deep voice carrying a weight that silenced any hope for rest. Jonas, though weary, nodded. "I'm ready. Whatever it takes." Therak's gaze remained steady. "We call it the Great Challenge. It's not a trial given lightly, nor one to be taken on by the unprepared. In the history of our world, few have dared to attempt it, and even fewer have survived. The Great Challenge is a rite of passage for those who seek to earn not just our respect, but our trust. It will test every ounce of your strength and determination." The murmurs around the chamber grew louder as the council members exchanged knowing looks. Jonas could feel their collective anticipation, and it only fueled his resolve. "Tell me what I need to do," he replied, his voice unwavering. Therak nodded, his eyes narrowing. "The Great Challenge takes place in the heart of the Glass Desert, a place where only the most resilient dare tread. It is a vast expanse of razor-sharp crystal formations, formed over millennia by intense heat and seismic pressures. The desert's volatile energy amplifies magnetic fields, making movement difficult. You'll need to cross it on foot, carrying only what you bring with you." The room fell silent, and Jonas felt the weight of the task settle over him. The Glass Desert was notorious even among Hades' people. Legend spoke of it as a cursed landscape where the sun blazed unrelentingly, and crystal formations could slice through armor. The desert was an embodiment of Hades' harshness, a testament to the planet's unforgiving nature. Crossing it meant battling not only the terrain, but his own physical and mental limits. Before he could respond, Therak continued, his voice grave. "But there is one more condition. You must retrieve the Heartstone." Jonas looked at Therak, who returned his gaze with a solemn intensity. "The Heartstone?" Therak nodded. "At the center of the Glass Desert lies the Heartstone, a rare crystal believed to hold the energy of our world itself. It's the most sacred artifact on Hades, a symbol of our endurance and strength. To carry it is to carry the weight of Hades' spirit. The path to the Heartstone is treacherous, and even if you reach it, the journey back with its added weight will test every fiber of your being." Jonas took a deep breath, letting the enormity of the task sink in. He was to journey across one of the most dangerous landscapes imaginable, retrieve a powerful artifact, and return, all without aid or rest. But he knew he had no choice. This was the ultimate trial, a final step to prove himself not just to the council, but to every being on Hades. With a determined nod, he accepted. "I'll do it." At dawn, Jonas stood at the edge of the Glass Desert, a vast and blinding expanse of jagged, shimmering crystal formations stretching as far as the eye could see. The air around him was thick with heat and the subtle hum of magnetic energy. He could feel it pulling at him, tugging with each step, making every movement an effort. In his hands, he carried a simple pack containing minimal provisions, a few rations, a water flask, and a makeshift cloak to shield him from the scorching sun. Zorik, who had accompanied him to the edge of the desert, offered a final piece of advice. "The desert will challenge you, Jonas, in ways you can't anticipate. Stay focused. The Glass Desert is as much a test of mind as of body. Lose your focus, and it will consume you." Jonas nodded, appreciating Zorik's warning, though he didn't allow himself to dwell on the dangers. "Thanks, Zorik. I'll make it back." With that, he took his first step into the desert, the ground beneath him crackling with energy. Each step felt like walking through thick, invisible currents, the magnetic pull creating a constant drag that drained his strength. The jagged crystals cut into his exposed feet, and though his cloak offered some protection, the sun's brutal heat quickly became unbearable. He forced himself to take measured breaths, focusing on his goal, the Heartstone. Hours passed as he navigated the shifting terrain, each footfall a challenge, every breath laced with dust. The glass desert seemed to stretch endlessly, its mirrored surfaces amplifying the heat until it felt as though he was walking through an inferno. Jonas's feet bled from cuts where the crystals sliced through his flip-flops, and his body ached from the magnetic resistance. As the sun dipped lower in the sky, he finally caught sight of the Heartstone. Embedded in a cluster of massive crystal pillars, it glowed with an inner light, radiating a warmth that seemed to pulse like a heartbeat. Jonas felt a surge of relief mingled with awe. This was more than a stone. It was a symbol of Hades' essence, a testament to the indomitable spirit of its people. He approached carefully, reaching out to touch the stone. As his fingers made contact, he felt a wave of energy surge through him, a connection to the planet itself, as if he could feel every tremor, every shift, every pulse of life that Hades harbored. He lifted the Heartstone, its weight surprisingly heavy, the dense crystal feeling like an anchor pulling him toward the earth. The return journey would be even harder. With the Heartstone in his arms, Jonas turned to face the endless expanse of crystal that lay between him and the edge of the desert. Every step was more grueling than the last. The added weight of the Heartstone intensified the magnetic pull, making it feel as though he were wading through invisible waves of resistance. His muscles burned, his vision blurred, but he forced himself to keep moving, driven by the knowledge that failure meant abandoning everything he'd come to accomplish. The desert was unforgiving, its silence broken only by the crunch of his footsteps on the crystal shards and the faint hum of magnetic energy. Jonas's mind began to play tricks on him as exhaustion set in. He thought he saw figures in the distance, mirages of shadowy shapes beckoning him forward or taunting him to turn back. He forced himself to ignore them, focusing only on the weight in his arms and the rhythm of his steps. Hours bled into each other as he pushed onward, his body growing weaker, his grip on the Heartstone loosening. His water supply dwindled, his energy drained, but he continued. The harsh landscape became a blur as his mind entered a state of sheer survival, a primal determination taking over. He would reach the edge of the desert. He had to. Just as the sun began to dip below the horizon, casting the desert in an eerie, blood-red glow, Jonas spotted the figures of Therak, Zorik, and several other council members waiting at the edge of the glass desert. They stood in silence, their expressions grave as they watched him approach, his figure swaying with exhaustion but unbroken. With the last of his strength, Jonas stumbled forward, clutching the Heartstone as he finally crossed the threshold of the desert. He fell to his knees, his vision swimming, the weight of the Heartstone pressing down on him even as he surrendered it to the ground before him. The silence was profound as the council looked on, their gazes filled with a mixture of awe and respect. Therak stepped forward, lifting the Heartstone and inspecting it before looking down at Jonas, who struggled to catch his breath, his body battered but unbowed. Therak's expression was one of solemn admiration. "You have done what many of our own people could not," Therak said, his voice soft but resonant. "You have carried the Heartstone across the glass desert. You have shown us resilience, honor, and strength, not just of body, but of spirit." The council members nodded in agreement, their expressions shifting from skepticism to respect. For the first time, Jonas felt that he was not just tolerated, but truly accepted. Therak extended a hand, helping Jonas to his feet. "You have proven yourself beyond words, Jonas Nix. The people of Hades will follow this alliance, not just because the council commands it, but because you have earned their loyalty." Jonas managed a weary smile, the weight of the journey beginning to fade as he stood beside the council members. "It was never just about earning loyalty," he said, his voice hoarse but resolute. "It was about proving that we're stronger together than apart." Therak nodded, a rare look of approval crossing his stern face. "You have given us reason to believe in that strength." As the sun set over the glass desert, casting the world in shadows, Jonas stood among the people of Hades, no longer an outsider, but a respected ally. He had faced the harshest trials Hades could. With the Heartstone safely returned and the alliance solidified, Jonas had accomplished what few thought possible. Hades, a world once skeptical, even disdainful of outsiders, had recognized him as a symbol of resilience. He had not just survived their trials. He had understood their values, adapted to their way of life, and demonstrated a strength that went beyond physical endurance. Now he stood not only as a diplomat for the Union, but as a respected ally of Hades, someone who had earned his place among its people. After the Council's formal declaration of the alliance, the entire city of Hades gathered in the main square, a vast plaza surrounded by towering black stone buildings and massive statues depicting ancient Hadean warriors. Fires burned atop obsidian pedestals, casting flickering shadows over the assembly. The air was thick with anticipation, and Jonas could feel the energy radiating from the crowd, a palpable mix of respect and curiosity. He was about to address not only the council but the people of Hades, a prospect that filled him with both pride and trepidation. Therak led Jonas to a raised platform at the center of the square, where they stood side by side. The council elder's gaze swept across the gathered crowd before he raised his hand, calling for silence. The low murmur of the crowd faded, and the only sound was the crackling of flames. Therak's voice, deep and resonant, carried through the plaza. "People of Hades, we stand at the dawn of a new era," he announced, his tone solemn, yet filled with a powerful conviction. "For centuries, we have endured alone, our strength forged in the fires of this unforgiving world. But today, we acknowledge the strength of another. This human has crossed the glass desert, borne the weight of the Heartstone, and proven that the Union is worthy of our respect. Jonas Nyx, diplomat of the Galactic Union, has earned his place among us." A low rumble of approval swept through the crowd, a sound of acknowledgement that Jonas knew was rare among the people of Hades. He stepped forward, feeling the weight of 1,000 eyes upon him. He hadn't prepared a speech. Instead, he allowed himself to speak from the heart, drawing on everything he had experienced and learned during his time on this fierce world. "When I came here, I knew Hades was strong," Jonas began, his voice steady but humble. "But I didn't truly understand what strength meant to you. I came with the goal of forging an alliance, but I quickly realized that Hades had more to teach me than I could ever bring to it." He paused, meeting the eyes of the gathered Hadeans, each face a testament to survival, resilience, and pride. "Your world has challenged me in ways I didn't expect, and it has changed me. I see now that strength isn't just about surviving hardship. It's about embracing it, understanding it, and letting it shape you without losing who you are. Hades has taught me that." A few nods of approval spread through the crowd, and Jonas continued, his voice growing stronger with conviction. "The Galactic Union came to Hades hoping for an alliance, but what we found was a kinship. Hades' strength is not something we wish to change or control. We are here to honor it, to learn from it, and to stand with you as equals." He took a breath, his voice lowering, but the words resonating powerfully. "The Union has resources, yes. We have technologies that could aid Hades in times of need, but we also have something to learn. Your people, your endurance, your spirit, they have reminded us of what true resilience means." Therak placed a hand on Jonas's shoulder, a gesture of solidarity that did not go unnoticed by the crowd. His voice, loud and clear, cut through the plaza. "Let it be known that from this day forward, the people of Hades recognize the Union as a true ally. In times of need, they shall call upon us, and we shall answer." A cheer rose from the crowd, a wave of fierce pride and newfound trust. The people of Hades showing their approval in the only way they knew, with a declaration of unity. Jonas felt a swell of gratitude, humbled by the support of a people who had once viewed him as an outsider. In the weeks that followed, the alliance between Hades and the Union took on a tangible form. Hades' warriors trained Union operatives in extreme survival tactics, teaching them how to endure hostile environments and embrace the mindset needed to navigate adversity. Union scientists worked alongside Hadean engineers, sharing advanced materials and technology that could reinforce Hades' infrastructure against seismic activity. For the first time, Hades' society began to benefit from resources beyond its own, strengthening their world without compromising their independence. Jonas became a fixture on Hades, moving through the city freely and often joining the council in discussions about future collaborations. The people had grown accustomed to the sight of him. Still in his robes and flip-flops, the diplomat who had walked the flame pits and carried the Heartstone. His presence had become a symbol of their alliance, a reminder that strength could take many forms. One afternoon, Therak invited Jonas to the council chamber for a private conversation. Jonas sensed a change in the elder's demeanor, a subtle shift from the formality of their earlier encounters. "Jonas," Therak began, his voice softer than usual, "you have shown us a strength that is rare among outsiders. You have not only earned the respect of the council, but of the people as well. Yet I sense that your time here has changed you in ways that go beyond duty." Jonas nodded, understanding what Therak was getting at. "Hades has become more than just a mission for me," he admitted. "This world has taught me resilience in a way I didn't think possible. It's reminded me that strength is not just about the self, but about the connections we make. Hades will always be a part of me now." Therak's gaze softened, a hint of approval in his eyes. "Then you understand what it means to be Hadean. You may never have scales or withstand our storms as we do, but you carry the spirit of Hades within you. And for that, you will always have a place here." The elder's words resonated deeply with Jonas. It was more than he had ever expected. To be seen as part of a world that had once viewed him with suspicion, to be accepted by a people who valued resilience above all else. He had not just earned their alliance, he had earned their trust. When it was time for Jonas to leave Hades and return to the Union, the farewell was bittersweet. The city gathered once again in the main square, where fires burned atop the obsidian pedestals, casting a warm glow over the crowd. Therak stood beside Jonas, a solemn expression on his face as he addressed the gathered Hadeans. "Today, we say farewell to a friend," Therak began, his voice filled with respect. "Jonas Nix came to us as a diplomat, but he leaves as an ally. He has carried our Heartstone, crossed our glass desert, and proven that the Union's strength is one we can trust." Jonas stepped forward, his gaze sweeping over the faces of the people he had come to respect deeply. "Thank you, Hades," he said, his voice thick with emotion. "You've taught me more than I can put into words. I promise that the Union will honor this alliance, and I will carry the spirit of Hades with me wherever I go." As he turned to leave, the crowd raised their arms in a silent gesture of respect, a farewell from a world that had once been closed to him, but now embraced him as one of their own. Back in the Union's headquarters, Jonas was met with a hero's welcome. His success in establishing an alliance with Hades was celebrated, and Union officials commended him for his resilience and unique approach to diplomacy. But Jonas felt a sense of distance, a quiet longing for the harsh beauty of Hades and the strength of its people. Over the following months, Jonas worked to integrate Hades into the Union's network, ensuring that their alliance remained one of mutual respect and equality. Hades became known as the Union's vanguard, a world that embodied resilience and strength. Their warriors trained elite teams across the Union, sharing knowledge of survival in the harshest conditions, while Hadean engineers collaborated on projects that fortified Union planets against natural disasters. Jonas continued his work as a diplomat, traveling to distant worlds and negotiating alliances, but Hades was never far from his thoughts. The flip-flops he had worn across the glass desert remained with him, a reminder of the trials he had endured and the lessons he had learned. They were battered, worn, and a little ridiculous by Union standards, but to him, they symbolized the spirit of resilience he had found on Hades. As he moved through the galaxy, he carried with him the teachings of a world that had shaped him into something more than a diplomat. He was now a part of Hades' legacy, a carrier of its strength, and a testament to the fact that sometimes the greatest alliances are forged not by force, but by mutual respect, endurance, and a willingness to walk through fire, both metaphorically and literally. And in every mission, every new encounter, Jonas felt the quiet, steady beat of the Heartstone within him, reminding him of the world that had challenged, tested, and ultimately welcomed him as one of their own.